Welcome to the Connor's Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. Right now, our next guest has a book out. It's got an intriguing title, The Missionary of Wall Street, the author, Stephen Auth. Welcome to Connor's Corner.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Missionary of Wall Street. You don't think about missionaries being on Wall Street, so what exactly is your book about?
It's about a mission we've been doing down near Wall Street in Soho with a bunch of Wall Street guys helping me, really looking for former Catholics, trying to bring them back to the church. So the book is kind of a spiritual page-turner about the spiritual lives of a lot of people in New York City that aren't used to talking about matters of faith out on street corners. And me and my fellow missionaries are out there doing just that with folks. And I don't know, you can come at it from a lot of angles, but the people who've read the book have told me it just leaves with a sense of hope, that there is something mysterious out there greater than us. And people are deeper than you think at a spiritual level. We're just not used to talking about it that much.
Yeah, because in today's world, it takes a little bit of courage to talk about religion. How do you perform your mission? I mean, what do you exactly do?
Well, first of all, to clarify, we are in one of the most affluent neighborhoods of New York City. So this is not a mission to, it's not a soup kitchen. There's lots of that in New York City. We're out really in a pretty affluent neighborhood, and we're on street corners engaging people joyfully and lovingly about their faith. We usually are Catholic. And, it's amazing how many people will stop and chat with you about whether they are or they aren't or what that means to them. And ultimately, our goal is to find folks who are former Catholics or maybe weak Catholics in their faith, and get them to come back to the church for a visit and hopefully maybe the sacrament of confession and kind of reinvigorate their faith.
For instance, let's say you meet somebody in a street corner, you engage in conversation. Obviously, if they're not interested, they're not interested. But I imagine you have to take some verbal abuse every once in a while.
Fairly regularly. It's usually, Mike, about a 40-to-1 ratio on an average night. Folks that are not interested or just ignore us or, as you say, maybe a little bit abusive. But even a lot of those encounters usually end up in a kind of very happy way. The missionaries out there are folks that themselves are cracked rocks, if you will. None of us are perfect. And we engage people in a kind of very joyful, confident manner. And ultimately, they see that and they want to have a piece of that. So it's kind of surprising how many people will actually talk to you.
Now, you say you try to get people in confession. Do you have priests in the area, in the vicinity?
Yeah, we always have priests. We do this outside of Old St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is the original St. Patrick's Cathedral down Soho. And we always have at least 3 or 4 priests with us when we do the mission. We do it 4 times a year during Holy Week, Ash Wednesday. We'll be doing that in September in the San Gennaro Festival, which is a great time. A lot of Catholics come down for their sausage and pepper sandwiches down there at the Feast of San Gennaro, and next thing they know, they find themselves in church. And we do it in Advent during Christmas, which is a fun time of year to do it. So, but we always have priests in gear because in the Catholic tradition, they're the meeting with God. I mean, you need the priests. You're not going to really get very far without them. And we are trying. Our goal is to get people to that sacrament because we think it's a chance for people who have, over the years, built up a wall between themselves and God, and they're wandering around. They were pursuing something that they thought would make them happy. It hasn't. They're a little bit in despair, underneath a patina of happiness. And it's a kind of form of radical evangelization. In the anonymity of a street corner with someone they don't know who appears to be a reasonable individual, people will start to open up. And you'll see that something deep down has really been bothering them. They were on their way to a fancy restaurant in Soho with their friends, and next thing you know, their life has taken a kind of miraculous turn. And the Missionary of Wall Street is full of these stories of people who've had their lives change. It's kind of very beautiful.
Let me ask you something. Let's say you approach somebody and they have, the old-fashioned argument, so to speak. Well, I don't need a priest to intervene with me. I don't need confession. I can speak directly to Jesus. Why do I have to go to a priest?
Usually I respond with a question, like, how's that working for you? I have my own relation with God. Invariably, if they're honest, that's not working really well. And, Jesus gave us this sacrament for a reason. He knows our human failings. He knows our ability to rationalize things. But deep down inside, our consciences are tugging at us. And without being able to hear him directly, it's such a wonderful sacrament. And of course, a lot of Catholics think of it as a kind of guilt-ridden thing, and it's not. It's really, we describe it as a sacrament of love. The way we tell people is, listen, the Lord already knows everything you've done. And it's not like he doesn't know. He just wants you to come back and say you're sorry. And when you can do that with a priest who's in persona Christi, you can hear his voice speaking to you and maybe giving you some advice in addition to giving you his mercy. And that's transformative to people. And I've seen so many people who start out a conversation saying, yeah, I have my own relationship with God, I don't need the sacrament, who on further discussion decide to go in and come out with this glow on, hugging me, tears in their eyes, saying my life has changed. So I know that something's going on here that's pretty rich, actually. And I think that's what keeps the missionaries coming back because, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, we're sort of getting our faces pounded in 40 times before someone stops and talks to us, when someone comes out and says, thank you for being on that street corner tonight, you changed my life, you really feel the presence of God and the mystery of God working in people's lives. It's really very beautiful. St. Teresa, when she came over here, said, you folks over here don't really have a poverty problem, but you've got a spiritual poverty problem. And, so this is where we think, there's a call to be missionaries to the spiritually weak or the spiritually suffering. And there's a lot of those folks in the city of New York.
What gave you the inspiration? What gave you the idea?
I fought it all the way, Mike. My wife called me one day during the financial crisis in 2009. I was back in Pittsburgh. I have a lot of staff back there, just settling in after another long day, trying to save the financial world, if you will. And, she said, Steve, I signed us up to do this mission in New York. I said, what do you mean, mission in New York? She says, yeah, we're going to go on the streets, look for cows. I like, sweetheart, this will never work, So honestly, it's not like it was my idea. I fought it. Didn't want to do it. Didn't think it would work. But to make the wife happy, I went out there. And 2 or 3 years into it, probably a couple years into it, I had an encounter out there with a guy who said just what you said, have my own relationship with God, and been there, done that, don't need Catholicism. It's all made up. And it's a long story. It's in the book. I'm not going to go through the details, but there were so many crazy coincidences, so-called, that involved both my life and his, that it gradually came to a conclusion that somehow or the Holy Spirit had worked to put me in that position. And this was a guy who was, it turns out, although indifferent at first, was literally on the brink of death, who'd been away from the Lord for a very long time. And it was after that encounter that I began to think, maybe the Lord does want me to do this. Because, all of us get pinged all the time, Mike, to do things, but we kind of discount them. We think, I'm not holy enough, I'm not good enough, that's for a saint, I'm too busy. But the Lord doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called, and if you answer his call, he'll make things happen. So no, I went into it reluctantly. It wasn't my plan, but I've observed what he's done through me and the other missionaries, and it's been a kind of wonderful thing. I mean, we've spoken to over 3 million people on the streets of New York now. We've had over 1,000 missionaries out there. We think we've brought back around 15,000 former Catholics to the sacrament of confession. So, the law of large numbers starts to add up. But as one of my missionaries always says to me, Steve, if you saved one soul times eternity, that equals eternity. Simple math.
Yeah, I remember a book about that. If you can save one soul, you've accomplished a lot in your life. There are thousands of you doing this
We've
right
had
now?
over 1,000 missionaries, not thousands. But on any given mission, we'll have
over
around
1,000.
100. Yeah.
If somebody right now is thinking, hey, maybe, and of course they're probably having the battle you had, but how would they find out about your mission? How would they volunteer?
Well, first thing, they should try to read the book, because I think it would give them inspiration. It's the Missionary of Wall Street. They can get it at Amazon for sure. But if they want to, they can follow me on Twitter, the Missionary of Wall Street. They'll get information there. If they go into the Sophia Institute Sophia Press website, which is where the book is also available, they'll see a link to learn more about the New York City mission. And we do a training session every year. We'll be doing one in front of the San Gennaro mission, which will be September 12th and 13th down in Soho. It's a great mission to do because it's a lot of fun with the festival going on. And it's really great fun. Everyone is Catholic or was Catholic that's going to that festival, but none of them are expected to go to church. But they're pretty easy targets, actually, at that time of year. So it's fun. It's a good mission.
Let me ask you something. You run into somebody who's Christian, but maybe they're not Catholic. Maybe they believe, maybe they don't. How often do you get involved in a conversation? And let's say they're not Catholic. Where would the conversation go?
Oh, it goes all over. We've had several ask if they could join the church and, gotten engaged in the RCIA program. They all want to, those who say they're not Catholic but Christian are often very good to us, want to talk more. We have candles we give out to light in the church, and a lot of them will come in to do that when they understand that they're very welcome there. We've had people of, say, Muslim faith sometimes respond at first very hostily to us as, hey, you Catholics all want to kill us. And we say, hey, come on, we can't let you get away with that. We don't want to. And some of those conversations have led to very interesting places, and in some cases we've gotten Muslims even to come into the church and pray for us. We've sent Jewish people who clearly need a visit to the synagogue back to their synagogues that haven't been there in a while. So, a lot of the other faiths at first might be a little quizzical or even maybe a little bit hostile. But we engage with them just as lovingly. I had a Hindu monk watching us one afternoon or evening, and I'm watching him out of the corner of my eye for about 15 minutes. I'm thinking, okay, he's going to have something to say about this, So he comes over after 15 minutes, and he says, you two guys over here, I'm just kind of following you in amazement, because obviously I'm a Hindu monk, and you're not going to turn me to Catholicism, but I really appreciate what you're doing out here. It's obvious that you love every person that you're meeting with, even the ones that are rejecting you. And, Mike, that is what got the faith going back in the first century, the early years of Christianity. The thing that really distinguished us was our agape love, or our unselfish love, and our joy. I mean, people couldn't quite figure it out. And joy is different than happiness. Joy is a kind of confidence in God and in the future. And those two characteristics were what the early missionaries of the church, that's what made them stand out, and it's what had the church spread like wildfire. And today, in today's culture where a lot of us Catholics are hiding inside our church walls and don't want to get out there, because the culture doesn't seem to want us out there. More than ever, we need to be out and about proclaiming the faith. And this is a very radical way of doing it. But in a way, if you read the book, I think you'll come away inspired, one, maybe even to do this, but two, that, hey, people will engage with you, maybe over dinner or over a business dinner or whatever. It doesn't need to be on the streets of New York, but they will engage with you if approached in a loving and joyful fashion. And we need to be a little more bold, in this world, because if we're not, I think the culture is kind of driving us in a whole other direction. And I don't think it's a good direction necessarily. I mean, some of it is good, but I think it's increasingly trying to push God out of the picture.
Now every once in a while somebody may say to me, how can you be a Catholic? All the priests are pedophiles. If you get approached and that comes into the conversation, how do you handle it?
Well, I was called a pedophile the very first day we went out on this mission after my wife dragged me reluctantly to do it, so it's a good question. And, what I say is to them, look, the church is, like all things human, is implemented by fallible folks, and I can't defend some of the terrible things that have been done by our priests. But that doesn't mean the whole church is an evil institution. It's the bride of Christ. It's a spiritual, eternal institution. That's why it's been here 2,000 years, and you shouldn't let some, accidents like that have happened or bad things that have happened to influence your own ability to get to heaven through the instrument of the church which the Lord gave us. It's our church. It's not the bishop's church or the priest's church. It's God's church, and it's, in a sense, our church. Each of us has an individual moral accountability to keep that church alive. It's been so for 2,000 years. So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, but, the other thing is that so many of the priests, and you got to feel for them too, because they're all tarred and feathered with the same brush, but there's so many good priests that I know that have been so important to my own spiritual journey. And I always assure people that we've got some really good ones back there in the church waiting for them.
Stephen, that's well said. Thank you for what you're doing. Keep up the good work. The name of the book, Missionary of Wall Street, and where can you get this again?
You can get it on Amazon.com or at SophiaInstitute.com, the publisher.
All right. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. God bless you.
Thank you, Mike. God bless.